Hey, Modernizing Medicine team, this is John Barrows with JB Sales. So I'm super excited to be part of your sales kickoff here. I've heard a lot of great things and all the potential you have in front of you. Brian Boyd and I went through a bunch of information about where you guys are, and we talked about putting together a little presentation here to talk about the age of the agile seller and kind of what I'm seeing out there. And for those of you who don't know me, I've been in sales for about 25 years, held every position in sales, started with Black & Decker, selling power tools, went to Xerox. From there, that's where I got my real sales education. I mean, talk about selling a commodity here, right? 45 pages a minute over 42 pages a minute. But that's really where I got my education and learned how to take rejection. And then I started a company called Thrive Networks doing outsourced IT support for SMBs, right? So we went into small businesses. We managed their entire infrastructure, servers, workstations, backup, security, everything. And it was similar to practices because I was knocking on doors. I was trying to get the executives to pay attention to me. So we did that. And look, I was about 25 years old when that happened, when we started that company, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I took every training I could, Sandler, Miller, Hyman, Taz, Spin, you name it, I was taking it. And I came across this company called Basho, and it was the first training that I liked. And the reason I liked it was because it was super tactical. It wasn't this big theory about selling, this huge process I had to follow. It was, hey, here's how to send an email. Send an email. Here's how to make a phone call. Make a phone call. So I actually used those techniques that I learned at Basho to help grow Thrive. We ended up being the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for a few years in a row, got us to about 85 employees and about 12 million in revenues. And then we sold off to Staples. And I spent about a year going through that integration and come to find out, apparently I'm not a corporate guy. I don't have much of a filter here, and I really don't like playing politics. So after a little while, Staples offered me another position. It's a nice way of firing me. And so I was looking for a job, and Basho said, John, you want to be a trainer? I'm like, no, absolutely not. I'm like, why not? I'm like, I don't like trainers. You know why? Because most sales trainers I had come across up until that point in my career were either failed sales professionals or professional presenters. And if you've ever been through a training where you could tell the trainer's never actually done what they're telling you what to do, you can tell, right? So I didn't want to be that guy. And they said, don't worry, John, you have to use these techniques to sell so you can train so you can get paid. Like, all right, I like the whole practice what you preach thing, right? So I joined Basho, took on some bigger accounts, brought on some bigger ones, and then to make a very long story short, they screwed it all up and I took it over. So went off on my own about 7 years ago with JB Sales, took all my clients with me, and now I'm working with some of the fastest growing tech startups out there, Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, Slack, Google, and a whole bunch of others, and also a lot in the medical device field, Athena Health and a few others. So I get the space, but I'm not just a trainer. I still sell every single day. So what I'm going to share with you today is I get to see a lot of things that are happening, and a lot of things have changed. And so I'll share with you what I'm seeing change and where we need to go with this, and why I think agility is the number one skill that is going to be your competitive advantage moving forward. So we're going to hit on, messaging, email, phone, video, how to use video throughout the sales process, negotiations, questioning skills, and even some objection handling. So I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff out there because we're going through a really interesting transition in sales. I start off almost all of my presentations with the death of the average sales rep because I'm watching sales reps die a painful death. And I mean average ones. People say that, sales reps are going to be replaced by technology. That's obviously just not true. Good and great sales reps, I think, are going to be far more valuable moving forward here to help people make decisions. But the average ones, and I mean average, I mean the ones who are just, blasting out template emails, making generic cold calls, asking BANT questions or press and play on demos, all that stuff is going to get replaced. I'm watching it. I'm seeing computers actually write emails better than any rep I could ever train. And so the question I think we have to ask ourselves right now is, what can we do that a computer can't? And that question's getting a lot harder to answer these days. So a couple of things here. I'm going to talk big picture concepts, and then we'll talk very tactical things moving forward. Big picture concepts to try to address this and evolve here so that we can get better, right? And by the way, when I was talking about death of the average sales rep 4 or 5 years ago, that was before COVID even hit. Now COVID hits us, and those average sales reps are struggling. The people that didn't treat this as a profession to try to get better every single day and were just going through the motions, they're in some trouble right now. We have to adapt. So let's figure out how to adapt. And the two big picture concepts that help me, at least, is one of them is the concept of context over content. Okay. I stole this one from Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if any of you follow Gary Vaynerchuk. He's kind of crazy, but he's cool. He said a while ago, look, if everybody talks about content is king, content is king. He said, fine, if content is king, then context is God. And that got me thinking about sales versus marketing. Marketing is content, sales is context. If we as sales professionals are not putting any context around our content, then we're no different than marketing. And I have no idea why we're getting paid to do what we do. Blasting out template emails, that's content. I don't need a sales rep to do that. Making generic cold calls, pressing play on demos. I don't need any of that from a sales rep. I can do that all better with technology. What I need a sales rep is to put some context around that. So those marketing materials that marketing gives us, right? Don't just share them out there. Read them, consume them, and then share them and tell them why it should be interesting to me based on what you know about me. You know, if you have a webinar or an event coming up, don't just say, hey, I want to invite you to the event. Tell me why. Me specifically, why do you think I should go to this? Take that email that marketing sends out and says, hey, John, the reason I think you should go to this is because. Social. If you're sharing on social and building your brand and those type of things, don't just share and repost things. Share them with your context. Hey, I read this interesting article. My key takeaways were X, Y, Z. You know, what are your thoughts? Context over content. One more is presentations. Nobody cares about the whole presentation. If you got 30 slides in your slide deck, I promise you the person that you're presenting to only cares about 10 of them. So let's figure out what those needs are and tailor that presentation. Otherwise, why not just send them a video? So context over content, please remember that, all right? The other piece, and I think this is going to lead into the agility conversation here, is science over art, all right? You know, obviously sales is a science and an art. There's no question about it. But sales should be looked at, in my opinion, as way more of a science than an art, especially right now. Because the science lays the foundation for the art form to be that much more effective. The structure, the process that we put in place allows the art form to be more effective. And somebody asked me recently, John, you know, if you could go back and tell your 22-year-old self something, what would it be, right? My number one answer to that, A/B split test everything you do. And I mean that. Say you're making calls into doctor's offices or specialist offices, right? And you're trying to get to the doctor, right? So come up with 2 different messages to that doctor. Make 20 phone calls with this approach, make 20 phone calls with that one. See which one yields a higher response rate. Objection handling. There's no rocket science to objection handling. It's just science. Write down an objection that you're getting absolutely destroyed on. Google best objection handling techniques. There's a whole list of them. Feel, felt, found, reprioritization, clarification, justification, whatever. Write down that objection. Come up with 2 different ways of handling it. Next 10 times it comes up, deal with it this way. Next 10 times, deal with it that way. By split testing and taking this approach, you can find out what works a lot faster and get better. Also, it'll help you get through this mess that we're in right now of all working from home. I know it's tough, right? Because we used to be able to at least go on site with people and meet with people, and there was something to that, right? Now we're all sitting at home. And, you know, I don't know about you, but it gets a little dry after a while talking to the walls here. So how do you stay motivated through this? Be a scientist. Be a scientist. Think about it. Because say you make, let's go the cold calling route. Say you make 50 dials in a day and you get no meetings. It's a terrible day, right? I agree with you. But if you make 50 dials and you make 25 dials with this approach and 25 dials with this approach and you still get no meetings, to me, that's actually not a bad day because you just figured out 2 approaches that don't work. Tomorrow you could try a couple new ones. And if you can learn something every day, you can get through this and you'll get through it better. Okay. So let's talk a little bit here about some of the specific tactics that we're going to hit on, right? Again, I'm going to give you some frameworks, some structure around how to craft messaging and then how to put that messaging into calls and emails. And then from there, we're going to talk about even video, right? Video is one of the things that I'm seeing a huge trend with right now, especially LinkedIn videos. I'll show you that in a bit. We're getting some of the highest response rates. Negotiations and this give-get component of negotiation to objectively measure where you are in the deal. And then objection handling and some questioning skills. So we're going to hit on all these different things. I know this is a pretty diverse audience. I know we got sales engineers in the room. I know we got specialists and everything else. So I'm going to try to make this as applicable to everybody. Hopefully you'll pull out at least a couple of nuggets from here that'll help you get that much better in 2021 so we can crush it. All right. So let's get into it. All right, let's first talk about messaging. Okay. Anybody love their elevator pitch out there? I used to think the elevator pitch was it. When I was back at Thrive, that company I was telling you about, right? I knew my equation cold. I knew I had to make $400 a week to get 8 meetings a month, to get 4 proposals, to get 2 pieces of closed business at an average deal size of $3,500 a month. Like that was my equation, and I ran it, right? 400 dials, okay? But back then it was really just a numbers game for me. I figured I knew I wasn't bright enough, but I knew I could work harder than everybody else. And so I just worked harder, right? I made 400 dials and I went on those meetings, and I traveled around Massachusetts going to, different offices and everything like that. And then stayed up at night doing all my paperwork and everything else. And again, I thought the pitch was it. Right? And the elevator pitch is terrible for so many reasons, because it's usually all about us and how great we are. It's way too long. It's usually super cheesy, and it's just not natural. Right. I'll give you a framework here, but I'll prove to you, right? I made $400 a week for 5 years, 5 painful ass years, by the way. And, I'll prove it to you, because this is the voicemail that I left 399 times a week for 5 years with my elevator pitch. And by the way, I'm going to take off my glasses here to prove to you I am not reading this. I promise you. Okay. This is